Hey there, super friends. This is Joey with Last Point Gaming. Today is Tuesday, January 9th, 2018. If you want to connect with us on social media, you can friend up our Last Point Gaming Facebook account. You can follow us on Twitter at Last Point Gaming. You can follow me personally on Twitter at Stranger Sparrow, or you can always email us directly at lastpointgaming@gmail.com. It's getting better. Oh, and you can also subscribe to us on YouTube. I think I need to just rehearse that like a whole bunch. Anyway, things are happening. But I guess I'm going to talk about that tomorrow. Before I get into the thing I said I was going to talk about today, I just want to point out how much the faux concerned smack talk, it bugs me. There's a video today with a couple of, my favorite personalities, and I'm not going to mention who, and I'm not going to leave breadcrumbs for people to go track it down. I mean, if you happen to stumble across it, you'll probably see my comment, where, some guy's like, dude, please, for your own health and safety, shed a couple pounds. Like, dude, everybody gets that you're being a dick. Just have the backbone to step up and be honest about it. We had a little bit of an exchange. He insists that he's not, in fact, being a dick, and, he's just really concerned. Well, that is for this individual to evaluate for themselves and or with their primary care physician. I don't know. It just bugs me so much to see you don't fit my definition of perfect, so I want to say something about it, but I don't want to be called out for being an asshole, so I'm going to go with the faux concern route. Either that, or it's people projecting their own positive self-changes, which you actually see a lot. And it's why most of the worst, draconian asshole anti-smokers, most of them are ex-smokers. And the reason they get this way is because they self-affirm by projecting on other people. Because nicotine is incredibly addictive, not to mention all the other shit they put in cigarettes. That also, on top of the chemical addiction, you're fighting a physical habit that you've associated with probably calm and safety for many years. It's a real hard vice to break. Notice how I don't even put an effort into it. So in order to kind of keep off of it, I feel like the majority of people have to continue to consciously tell themselves cigarettes are bad for you, and that stuff's awful, and it smells bad, and they're expensive, and this and that. And in order to really reaffirm that, they have to tell other people. And I'm not saying that as a judgment thing, they just gotta be little bitches about it. No, I get it. So I guess this person could also be voicing what they feel is a real concern, because they at one point were very heavy and they took control of their life and they lost a lot of weight. And so it's another one of those affirmation things where, I'm going to tell this other person that they should do this and everything because it affirms to me that what I did was right and keeps me on the straight and narrow, I guess. I'm trying not to judge, but it just happens so much, which actually kind of segues into what I'm going to talk about today. That's the faux concern angle to get away with basically being a douchebag and have people go, well, I can't really call you out on it. Well, fuck that. I will. Which does get into what I'm talking about today, and that is the current drama controversy going around the Magic community. Jeremy has made statements that since his ban, he is going to burn it all down, and that is exactly what he's trying to do. Now, as far as concern for safety of children at events, or the concern for the safety of anybody at events, really, I think that's always a topic worth discussing, which is kind of the problem with him zeroing in on this particular topic, is it's really hard to be like, okay, dude, you have just, like, upgraded your rabble-rousing to max, because then it comes across as, like, I don't care about kids at events. Well, of course I do. I take my kid to events. Hopefully she eventually builds up her skill and concentration that I can take her even to larger events, and I do plan on it. So, of course, I don't want sex offenders and predatory individuals attending events. However, the focus has been put on the judge community, which I do understand from the point of they are kind of a position of authority. But when you really look at it, your average large event, now at an LGS level, that's a whole different story. And I'll talk about that too. But at an event like a GP or an Open, you're looking at 300 players to like 1,000 players and 1 to 2 dozen judges. So to mitigate the risk in the judge community, like, you know, don't get me wrong, any risk mitigation is good, I guess. But at the same time, you're really looking at a small percentage of the people there. The other thing is you are focusing on people who will be noted if they are missing. If a judge isn't there to fire the event they're supposed to fire, or to watch the tables they're supposed to watch, you don't think that another judge who's picking up the slack for them is going to notice and be like, where the fuck are they? Whereas if a player's going down and just playing inside events, you know, they have way longer periods of time that they can go missing without being noted. So, not to make events sound scary though, I really wouldn't recommend taking your young, well, either oldish elementary school child or young teenager to an event like that and dropping them off and saying, good luck, I'll see you in 9 hours. I can't think of any parent that would do that. Hell, anymore, parents don't really drop kids off at game stores. And I don't think it's that our world has become a darker and more dangerous place. I think it's that we live in the age of information. Kid goes missing in Colorado. I know about it in 20 minutes because somebody's made a post about it and it's been shared out and it's gone viral because, you know, it makes people feel good to share out things that may contribute to somebody's safety, to may contribute to this child being found or, you know, help, and requires very little effort. You just click the share, right? And I'm not, hell, I share all of them. I signal boost anything like that, or missing pets, or over, I think it was the week between Christmas and New Year's, post came up on my feed about a cat that had been hit by a car, and a witness picked it up, contacted the ASPCA because they couldn't afford to take the cat for veterinary care. So they contacted their local ASPCA branch in hopes of getting this cat care before injuries from being hit by this vehicle became critical, and they were looking for a possible owner. So yeah, of course I signal boosted that shit, and it made me feel good to, like, oh, well, this was pretty local, so hopefully somebody in my local group either, you know, they share it out and someone in their network's missing this cat, or, you know, maybe somebody in my local network's missing this cat and I'm going to get them, you know, notified of it. So the world may seem like a darker and dangerous place, more dangerous place than it was when we were kids. But I think that's just the appearance because information is so much more freely available. Hell, 20 years ago, kid going missing didn't make national headlines unless they were missing for, you know, over a month or turned up dead, like with incredibly suspicious circumstances. Sorry, that sounds callous. I don't mean for it to, but you didn't hear about the, you know, 12-year-old going missing in Iowa if they were recovered within like a week. because it took time to get the word out and get local affiliate stations to pick up the story and everything, and nobody wants to be on the back foot of that, reporting on that, and then find out the next day that the kid had actually been found before they aired their segment on it. You just get news from watching your local news and reading the newspaper, and to buy the USA Today newspaper, which was national news, was like 3 times the cost of the regular local paper. Now we live with the internet that when this shit happens, it gets signal blasted and people keep boosting, so everybody knows about it. Whenever a kid in the tri-state area goes missing, I get an Amber Alert on my phone. So I think parents are just more aware, but you don't see that behavior of just leaving your kids with a bunch of unknown strangers. Hell, I don't even let Boo walk up to the park that's like a block away from my house by herself. When my brother and I were kids, we ran around town as long as it was daylight hours. So I think you just don't see that behavior of just drop your kid off and, good luck, I'm sure you'll be fine, because parents are more and more aware. Now, that being said, again, it's not that I want for predators to be in the midst in the gaming community. However, I don't think requiring background checks to become a judge is going to fix that. And I have no argument against requiring that. For what it's worth, I do have my clearances because I've mentioned before that I've done volunteer work at a couple local schools with a not-for-profit organization, and they handled getting my clearances that I required to do that. Now, I don't know if they have an agreement with the state police that they don't pay for these checks on their volunteers, or if that comes out. However it went down, I didn't have to pay for them. I just had to initiate the process and agree to allow my information to be used. But I have the necessary checks, so I don't really understand. I'm not saying that I'm not sure this actually fixes any kind of problem. It's not because I don't want to shell out the money for it. Because as long as I volunteer with this organization, I'll have them. The other problem is the requirements vary from state to state. So, my clearances that are valid for me to work, and it's for me to work specifically with schools. My clearances that are valid here in Pennsylvania may not be valid in, say, Maryland. So if it is going to be on somebody to ensure that the proper documentation is provided, that's where I think it might fall more on the TOs to say, oh, cool, you volunteered to judge for this event. Great. Now, this does mean getting events up and posted and accepting judge applications far in advance, because sometimes this paperwork takes a little while, especially if you're routing it through departments not in the state you live in. So that's where I can see an argument that it falls more on the TOs to say, okay, this is what you need to provide. Here are links to the appropriate websites to file, or contact information to file for these things. Here are going to be the costs. And I mean, honestly, I think the TO should handle those costs, because without judges, they can't run the event. But if not, personally, I don't have a problem shelling out for them. But, I also have pretty stable income. But because the requirements do vary from state to state, I could register the paperwork I have here with PA with the judge program, but that may not fly in Indiana or Ohio or Maryland or New York or Jersey or wherever. And again, you may be mitigating threat from the judges, but there really shouldn't be any threat there. So here's a pro tip for you. There should never be a reason that a judge needs to be alone with you. You know, it's one thing if they come up to the table and they ask you to step away from the table so that they can say something to you, maybe out of earshot. Though even that, like, your opponent should be made aware if you're being sanctioned for something. Because again, like, I can almost bet you any player that goes up against Alex Bertoncini watches every play he makes because he has a history. Whether you find that fair or not, he has a reputation for making what we'll call happy accident plays that benefit him solely. So because he has this history and this reputation, people, and this goes back to segments I've done and the segment that Paulo Viter with Channel Fireball did on why you should call a judge when the shit happens. Instead of just shrugging it off and going, oh, it was just a simple mistake, it's cool, they got it now. Because if a pattern is identified, then it looks more and more like malicious intent and not just bumbling. So, again, I can't even imagine a situation where a judge comes up to the table and asks you to step aside, unless it's a really delicate matter. But even there, you shouldn't be out of visual range for other players and other judges. And if a judge, say, asks you to step away from the table and then is asking you to go somewhere with just them, decline. Express that you are not comfortable with that. And if they get insistent about it, just start saying that you would like to speak to the head judge. Any ruling from a floor judge, you have the ability to appeal that ruling to the head judge. Now, I don't know if the head judge goes to the players or if the players go to the head judge. I don't really know how that works because I've never done this. But I would just, at that point, say, you know what? Let's just take this to the head judge. And if they start, well, you don't even know what this is about yet or anything else, you're like, well, you're not telling me. You're asking me to put myself in an uncomfortable position where I'm going to be out of visual and auditory range of other people. I don't know what's going on here, but let's just go deal with this with the head judge. And if they continue to be insistent, just get louder about it. I don't think that this is an issue people are going to run into, but the one-on-one contact between players and judges at larger events is minimal to non-existent. I can't personally think of any reason. Now, if there's some reason that they're going to ask you to leave the tournament venue, I would imagine that they would take backup for that. That's my read on that. So, in any case, know that you should never be led off to a dark corner with a judge. There should be no reason that this happens. There should be no reason that you're led off to a dark corner with another player. But again, I think the threat is much bigger with players that their absence may not be as noted as when you don't show up to fire the side event you're supposed to fire, or there's one judge handling 4 tables and there's supposed to be one judge per 2 tables at this event. So where the hell is this missing guy? People are going to notice that they're missing. And, it's important for players to know that judges do not have uncontested dominion over them. That there is a higher authority to appeal to. Now, again, this is a little different at the LGS level, and this is why I can see this being more of a problem at the LGS level. So something I do want to point out, if there's somebody that you have suspicions about or that has been convicted of a crime that should preclude them from judging events. If you go over to the Last Point Gaming Twitter, I pinned the tweet with the link to report a judge, and you can report good behavior or bad behavior this way. But in this, of course, particular instance, I'm talking about reporting bad behavior. Make sure that you make it known. Make sure that you make it known to the game store owner that, hey, you know this guy got convicted of, like, an inappropriate relationship with a minor, right? This is a soft and delicate issue, and that's why I say, like, I understand why people are kind of coming out and going, wait, we got to deal with this. But at the same time, this was started as a troll maneuver, and it's faux concern for the community, which, again, this is a risk WotC ran when they fully cut him loose. Now they have zero dominion over him. So he's just going to get bigger and badder in his claims and things that he's saying. People are still trying to report things he tweets to WotC, and, report him to Twitter if you want, but WotC can't do anything more to him. They took all that they could from him. Now, I'm not saying that justifies opening this can of worms kind of frivolously, but the other thing that people need to understand is not everybody who goes to an L2 and says, hey, I want to be a judge, gets to even test to certify. And this is why you could possibly, conceivably run into discrimination issues with a particular L2 that's just refusing to entertain female candidates that come forward, or minorities, or immigrants, or, whatever type of people that they, for some reason, have some kind of prejudice against. But, even when going to somebody that I was friendly with, like, Zach and I used to chat a lot. We don't so much anymore because we've gotten a little bit busy, but we used to chat like every other day before I'd even approached him and said, hey, I'm having a hard time nailing down an L2 to help me get my judge certification. But I'm trying to get serious about it, so, you're an L2, right? Can you help me out? Even there, he started the conversation where all L2s start the conversation with a potential candidate. Asking the questions that, and not even in the way like, okay, well, this is a formality, I have to ask you these things. But in okay, so you want to be a judge? And he, like, puts his L2 hat on and talks to me like he would any other candidate, despite having this existing rapport with him. So there is screening that happens. Unfortunately, though, you can't just go around requesting background checks on people without the authority to do so. So you have to go off of, the community's opinion of them and that sort of thing. So this definitely could lead to people who have convictions and just hide it well, getting through that stage. So again, I don't really have a problem with the idea of requiring judges to have these clearances. It just gets a little touchy when it does vary from state to state. What clearances are actually required, when they're required. For instance, when I first volunteered with this organization, I'd volunteered for a handful of specific events, and they come back and they're like, okay, we need to get all your clearances in place and everything, and they take like 2 to 4 weeks to process. Well, I had an event that I had volunteered for the following week, and I was like, oh, so I can't do that one? And they said, no, that one's fine because it's a one-time engagement. Whereas one of the other events I'd volunteered for was a series of 5 kind of lessons that I went into the same classroom at the same school. So for an isolated special event, sometimes there are waivers for that sort of thing. Especially in the case that there should be no exclusive one-on-one contact. So, yeah, I want children to be safe at events. I want everybody to be safe at events. So I don't necessarily have a problem with the idea of judges obtaining background clearances for events, but as far as judges on, currently active that have convictions, I do recommend you report them. But understand, when registering for a DCI number in the judge program, no photo ID is required. I'm pretty sure one of the guys at the shop admitted to me that his DCI name is a pseudonym. I ain't question about it. He seems like a fine guy. He doesn't set off any bells or anything, and he never seems to be trying to lure anybody away. Like, yeah, hey, come hang out and play some Commander at my house. So until that would become more of an issue, whatever. People register. Like, I'm registered with the DCI under Joey. I'm not registered with the name on my birth certificate. That if they would try to run any background check kind of thing on me, also my maiden name isn't registered at all. They don't have my social security number. You don't provide a social security number to get a DCI number. So, understand that the bigger threat really comes from the player base. And that's kind of how I see this. That the judge program does try to stay on top of these things and respond to things as they come up. And as far as that being reactive versus proactive, yeah, I mean, I guess it is, but at the same time, this is how it's been, as far as I understand, for 25 years. So I just urge you that when this stuff comes up and when people start talking about this, look at it with the logical perspective instead of allowing but what about the children to pull at your heartstrings? Because, I don't want offenders around my kid. So I am okay with the idea of screening them out, but then the next hurdle to tackle is the player base. Especially when you're looking at tournaments like the Pro Tour, where people come from all over the world. Don't do it. Thank you. So now you're even getting outside of U.S. jurisdiction on these things, on your ability to request background information. So, all in all, please don't leave your young children unattended at large events. I feel like that in general is just a good rule of thumb. And as far as the LGS level, if you know of a store owner, because the other thing at the LGS level, you do not require an L1. Pretty much anybody can be registered as a TO. So if you know that the person who's running the F&M has those kinds of skeletons in the closet, bring it to the store owner's attention. And if nothing's done about it, then yes, that should definitely be reported to WotC, because the threat of something happening on that level, where they're, it's that kind of trusting relationship and people have an opportunity to become more friendly. Like, if you'll notice, if you go to a GP or an open, judges tend to be less friendly and interactive than maybe you're used to from your LGS. Is because there's 500 players there. They may not be from that direct area. They may say hi to like people they know locally or whatever, but they're not like, yeah, hey, let's be buddies and everything, and that kind of welcoming, friendly thing that you may be used to from your L1 at your LGS. It's because it's a much different arena. So I think on the LGS level, yeah, this is much more of a concern, and you should definitely report those things. Again, start with the game store owner and say, hey, Are you aware of this? Because, this is somebody you're allowing to be around children. And, from there, the next escalation, of course, is to report it to WOTC, or if they are a certified judge, to the judge program. And again, that link is a pinned tweet on the Last Point Gaming Twitter account. I'll try to remember to share it out again, in relation to this post, because everybody should have that information to report judges that you find to be in dereliction of their duties, or, engaging in bad behavior. Or, if you want to say, hey, this judge is amazing and they're awesome and they're wonderful, that it's also a place where you can report that. So that's what I have to say on the issue. I appreciate that people are concerned for the safety of children, but that particular nut is a much bigger issue than looking at the judge program. And nobody is sheltering people with these kinds of records. If it's brought to their attention, it's dealt with. It's usually dealt with pretty quietly, though. So that's where that is. As always, if you made it this far with me, thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to y'all tomorrow.